Hello, my lovelies. Ginny O here, the author with no last name. And this is Ginny O Reads, the part of the channel where I read a chapter of an indie, science fiction, or fantasy book. This week, I'm reading the first chapter of Deston J. Munden's Tavern, a political high fantasy novel. You can find DJ at his website, djmunden.com. If you'd like to follow along, Tavern is available on Amazon. Link in the description below. From the back of the book. Information. Power. Respect. Zelnath of the Gnarled Root, a tavern owner, information broker, healer, and guildmaster of the Black Wind Company, has found a place far better than the forest from which he came in the magical metropolis and city-state of Ladad in the Magian Empire. When a simple act of kindness draws the ire of a troubled assassin, his love-stricken archmage father, and an army of magically constructed golems, Zell must scheme with vipers at the high court, mingle with royalty at the castle, blackmail drug dealers in the slums, and fight assassins and mercenaries in the streets. He needs to lean on the support of his motley crew of a dark elf assassin, a dragon pirate, a high elf royal, and a talking dog artificer to keep him from his own inner demons and doubts. Let's get right into it, shall we? Tavern, a Dargath Chronicles novel by DJ Munden. Chapter 1. Backbone. Zell was born without a backbone. At least that was what he thought about this cold night. Tonight turned out to be quite the adversary for him. The moons, Yeri, Mary, and Awi, hung in the black star-filled sky, spraying it with hues of red, blue, and yellow from their prismatic light. The cold winter air howled against his aching bones. It, at least, smelled crisp and tasted of a rare freshness found in a city, and made Zell feel welcomed. Rune-forged torchlights burned on either side of the yellowed, winding cobblestone street, setting them aglow with a warm, magical sheen. For many of the inhabitants, this was a normal cool night. For Zell, born in a warm-weathered forest halfway across Dargath, the weather was a little too cold for his liking. He appreciated it all the same, even between the shivers caught in his muscles. The only thing he wished for right now was that he had brought a coat, or at least something a bit warmer to wear. Years ago, he would have more than likely frozen to death. Zell walked down the street, his hands stuffed in his large sleeves for warmth. Thankfully, he had sense enough to choose his thick gray woolen robe over one of his thinner, more fashionable coats. Where he obviously had leave of his senses was when he decided to wear straw sandals. He hated shoes. They were evil and uncomfortable things created by silly men. He did own plenty of pairs of boots and shoes, however, that he didn't want to throw into a fire. Still, when given the choice, he would go barefoot everywhere, out of comfort and out of necessity. As the saying in the Shroud went, every flower had its own petals. In the Shroud of the Leaves, this little quirk wouldn't have mattered. I wonder how the weather's there now, he thought. No, he left home, and left for a good reason. Even if he missed the weather and the company he shared there. Ladad, this wondrous and complex metropolis, was his home now. Duke Talborn and his 6 sons governed the largest city on this side of the world. The very thought of its immense size still choked Zell. The large city was broken up into 6 districts: Port, Guard, Commander, Crafter, Merchant, and Military, from the outer ring to the inner circle respectively, ending with the castle Arumblum. Each of the Talborn sons governed over the one ring of the city. Often, Zell wondered if he built the city around the sons, or the sons around the city. Given the city was new compared to most of the world, he assumed it was the former. Despite the size, walking from one district to the next was as easy as following the main roads. Getting to a specific shop, your favorite inn, or even to your home was where the difficulty began. Roads wove together like silk threads of a spider, never happy with the size of its web. New places often sprung up, and construction was a common thing in some areas. A traveler could depart for a year and come back to the city and have no clue where to go. As the city grew, so did crime. Danger festered in those small cracks made from Lidad's growing pains. The side roads and the alleys weren't as safe as the rulers believed. Zell knew this from experience. He touched his cheek, feeling a deep scar against his skin. He knew he had to be careful down these dark paths, away from the impressive room-forged torches. A couple of years ago, he had learned that lesson the hard way. Born without a backbone. The words echoed in his head as he walked through the gate from the merchant to the crafter district where he lived. His feet remembered each turn, knew each loose stone underfoot as the light's glow grew dimmer and dimmer. Soon Zell began to navigate by the lights leaking from the cracks under every door or the occasional candle on a windowsill. He listened to the sound of footsteps, the trotting of horses against the road, and the clattering of men and women closing and locking their doors. Zell tapped the end of his twisted wooden staff in rhythm to the things he heard and remembered. His sense tingled with every detail. Something was different. Tonight, someone followed him. Zell chalked it up as his own brand of cautious paranoia at first. Never too safe, he told himself. Good way to get a knife in the belly thinking you're safe all the time. He tried to convince himself otherwise, though. They're just going home like you. Ain't nothing to worry about. Today's workday at the temple was a long one, and perhaps fatigue played tricks on him. No, that wasn't it. His optimism dipped more and more as he slowed his pace. He was being followed, not a doubt in his mind. Ugh! Shoes and nails. Zell growled, heart pounding in his chest. He just wanted to go home. Was that too much to ask? There was at least 4 of them. Their soft-soled boots made a low sound against the whistle of the winter's wind and the cobblestone underfoot. Each of them kept their breathing low and controlled, only one giving it away with a higher exhale than the rest. Local thugs, then. Maybe from a colder place. No, they're from here. The city guards would have given it away. They often had this look on their face when they saw an outsider, especially one out this late at night. These weren't professionals. Zell knew professionals. More likely street thugs. Zell gave a thin, rueful smile. Keep it down, boy. Don't give it away. Zell hummed through a couple of bard songs to calm himself down. He scratched the side of his jaw, feeling the coarse black hair of his beard against his fingernails. His large hand tightened against his staff as he leaned against it. They didn't know everything about him. The hood of his robe covered his face, and its length covered his stocky arms and legs. Robes tended to make someone look bigger or smaller than they were. They could only assume that a healer from the Temple of Shu was a decrepit old man or a fragile young boy. With a little luck, he could take them. A blossom of fear rose in his chest. Subconsciously, he touched the side of his jaw where an old broken tooth was. Sometimes old wounds never healed. He remembered. He always remembered. Zell allowed them to follow him through the finer parts of the crafter district first, by the grandiose workshops of the best carpenters, artists, tailors, blacksmiths, and armorers of the city. The rich crafters didn't like surprises, given that they worked into the late of night. Zell felt the burning of Bright Claw's forge before he even saw the big red glow in the middle of the plaza. Warmth rolled over his chest and hands as he approached the massive stone bell bellowing fire. Every torchlight in the city claimed this fire as their father, yet none shined as brightly. No matter sunlight, moonlight, rain, or snow, the forge stayed alive, even after its maker died hundreds of years ago. The lineage of the forge maker, known now as the Bright Claws, survives still. Maybe, after this, he should thank them. He walked around the forge to a long wooden bench by a small oak tree. He sat down, warming his fingers and watching the embers of the forge crack into the air. Underneath that, he listened to his pursuers stop in confusion. Zell saw them from the corner of his eye now in the well-lit area. The leader stood just outside the edge of the light, hugging the shadows. They didn't expect an extra stop. They aren't new to this. They're new to being caught. Zell leaned against his staff again. his fingertips laced on the twisted top. Born without a backbone. The words echoed again as his heart raced. Old times, yet not too long ago, lingered in his head. He swallowed hard. This was as good a night as any to get mugged. From the corner of his eye, he saw what Zell assumed to be the leader regaining his composure. He tried, to his credit, to slide from sight. Alas, it was too slow. In that second, Zell had already processed most of his appearance. He was a lanky man in brown mercenary leathers, and a dark-colored sash around his left arm. Pale-skinned, bald, a scar on his left cheek, rough light-colored stubble on his chin, and a few broken teeth in a row of crooked yellow. Classic. Zell respected him for that. Everyone liked a person that looked their part. Figured we talked before things got ugly. It's rude not to, you know. Zell cut the volume of his voice just a thread above the wind and the snapping of coals. He never liked his own voice. Too deep, too grumbly, and words just got caught between his teeth and his tongue. At his best, he sounded like a dock worker from the ports. At his worst, he sounded very much like a thug himself. Either way, he made himself sound priestly enough with threads of commoner and fatherly tones. He had his part to play. Can you give a guy a break? Tell me who hired you, mate. Zell shifted his weight in the hard bench as though to get comfortable. In truth, nerves made him squirm. He hoped that talking would iron those out. The men didn't respond. They just stood in the shadows with the awkwardness of a criminal caught. They wouldn't attack in the open like this. They knew he lived in a darker, more appropriate place to stab or bludgeon someone to death. Nothing? Zell shrugged. Thought I'd try at least. Forcing himself to relax, he pulled the wineskin from his side. His friends always told him he needed to stay hydrated. He uncorked the top with his teeth, spat the corded cork into his lap, and took a long drink. The liquid is nothing special, just cold water mixed with some honey and a bit of mint. Nothing hard. People didn't need to know that. Helped with his look. The tough guy persona. For now, though, he was just thirsty. Just gonna stand there and let a man ramble. That's rude. You might want to hear what I have to say next. I know why you're here. You're not fooling nobody. He didn't know what was going on. It was the only thing that made sense. Muggings just happened. They didn't wait. This was a hired hit. It's about the poisonings today, Zell realized with a remarkable amount of amusement. At the glass gardens. The ones that I've been fixing all day. Can't be anything else. I was just doing my job, mate. Just doing my job. If I crossed some sort of boundary, I didn't know. Still, last chance. If I get up from the spot and go down that street where I know your men, your savages really, are, I'm gonna break their faces. And your reputation. Probably in that order, but not guaranteed. Nothing. Again. Just stop before you embarrass yourself. He couldn't have dropped more clues to walk away from this if he wrapped them up and put a pretty bow on them. Zell drained the rest of his wineskin, getting to his favorite part at the bottom where everything tasted sweeter. After which, he rose and headed back home. He swore the men stopped following. Maybe they had picked up their common sense somewhere in the garbage. Sizing up a mark was important to all of his jobs. As a healer, as a tavern owner, and, well, his other occupation. So, as a result, he often let people do the same for him, free of charge. He didn't make it easy for them. They usually got it wrong the first time, underestimated him the second, and never had a chance the third time. Perhaps one day, somebody would think to use their eyes. A normal priest didn't wear gold rings on their fingers. They didn't own a staff of this quality, nor were they usually as big as he was. They saw what they wanted to see. Good way to get yourself killed or caught. The spectating game stopped the moment that Zell turned into his street, the Rugged Rock. What type of uncouth barbarian tries to beat up a man near his home? Bloody rude ones, apparently. They lined up in the narrow street, shoulder to shoulder in long dark cloaks that touched their feet. Zell eyed the weapons, poking out from their sleeves and grasped tightly in their hands. Blunt weapons. Good. That meant the person who sent them didn't send assassins, just thugs to silence him. Ton bows did bother him, though. Made of redwood as hard as steel, with a weight as light as a training sword, ton bows were a favorite among bruisers and enforcers. Zell touched the back of his neck, feeling the scarring on his spine. A cold memory surfaced in a brief flash in his head, and he lost his confidence for a moment. He felt his throat go dry, his mind blank, and his palms clam up. Born without a backbone, his conscience echoed again. This time he fought back. You've grown past that. Confidence never came in full for him. Zell often wondered if it did for anyone. Now we can talk. The ball man circled around him, grinning. Amazing how eager he was to talk now that he had all his boys. On my terms, never yours. He wasn't a large man, just tall, with a muscular frame that filled his leathers well. The light of the forge still lingered behind him, giving Zell a better look at his face. Not a good-looking fellow, to say the least. His nose sat in a crooked line on his face, his eyes bright with violence. Those yellow, crooked teeth were set in an unsettling smile on his slanted, uneven jaw. A bit of drool dribbled against the man's unevenly cut beard. No doubt this was his favorite part. My name's Bradis Gillian, and we're here to bloody you up, healer. Somebody don't like you, brother, and that's a shame. Is it, though? Zell said. He found himself falling into his own character, one truer and more visceral. His own accent flared. I reckon you didn't say no to the money. Zell knew people who loved their job. Nothing wrong with that, of course. A man had a right to love what he did. Bradis, Bradis. It's good to repeat someone's name when you meet him. Do I know you from somewhere? Might that you do. Bradis brandished his tombow from his side. His weapon appeared larger than his comrade's, thicker, and made of a different redwood than the others. A prized possession. No mistaking that look in his burnt orange eyes as he scanned the length of his weapon in adoration. The only thing he ever loved, Zell realized. Soldiers often cared for their weapon. Zell respected that, or he would have respected it in broad daylight. Where do you want to start first? My boys here think I'm great at breaking legs. Always need practice on other limbs, you know. Right. Maybe I shouldn't have gotten you talking. Now you're never going to shut up that big mouth. Zell only heard the tombow sailing through the air. Instincts took over. He blocked the attack low with his staff, both hands firm. Breda stared down for a second, confused on why his ears didn't meet with the satisfying crunch of a man's knees. He had given no indications of an attack, just acted, as did Zell. It didn't make sense to him. Zell saw it on his face. A shoe priest never fought, despite being with the disciples of what half the world thought as the god of chaos. Zell found an immense pleasure as it struck them. The temple often employed outside help for cases that they couldn't fix with their own magic, often for pay. Zell wasn't the type to ask for money from the temple. He just did it. It didn't make him a priest in the traditional sense. Devout to the cause, but not a priest. Zell tossed his hood back. Should have done your research, mates. Zelnath, of the Gnarled Root clan, was an orc. Very rarely did an orc from any tribe deal with the worldly events, unless it were forced into the fray. Until the last few centuries when the Tuscan Ring was created, the tribes only thought about fighting themselves and everything else on their continent. Now, with the aid of that High Council, had they begun becoming part of the world. There were only about 50 in the city. Most red-skinned bed drivers, brown-skinned earthwalkers, or the occasional bright green blood wars. The dark green and brown-skinned gnarled root, the most secluded of the orc clans, never showed up in cities, or even outside the Shroud of Leaves. Zell smiled with a perfect set of white teeth and 2 long lower tusks. He wasn't the perfect physical example of his clan, not the epitome of strength or physique, or the most powerful druid. He did serve a purpose. For the first gnarled root that many had seen, he served to remind the world that the wooden eyes were watching. Zell smacked Bradis on the side of the face hard with the head of his staff. The sound echoed in the air, a perfect strike shattering teeth and bone. Stunned, the tall man stumbled back, eyes glazed. You know better than to drop your guard, boy. Zell rolled his big shoulders. He wasn't muscular. He ate too much for that to be the case, but he was bearishly large for his short height, and strong. Ridiculously so after years of physical labor. That strike alone set a grown man sprawling. Want to try that again? The gang faltered as their leader spat out teeth and curses in equal measure. Zell felt for a moment that he overestimated these thugs, but they recovered fast enough with a frothy rage to rival a stampede of boars. Zell had no delusions that he could defeat 6 men. The numbers game tended to even get to the best of fighters, and he counted himself as modestly decent in terms of actual combat. They had, however, chosen to rough him up close to his home. They didn't realize that it held some of the best weapons in his arsenal. Right now, his magic needed to be enough. He jabbed his staff into the ground. Quircon wasn't only a staff. It was a conduit for his magic. It was his rune, his individual gift of aether that all men and women in the world of Dargoth possessed. With his magic, Zell rooted the magic into the ground, feeding it the energy to grow. The tree's limbs caught the first man by surprise, snaking up one leg and coiling up his body like a snake about to feast. It then spread sideways to the other men, quickly leaping from one person to the next until more than half the group stood ensnared. One smarter man, and Bradis managed to avoid the fate. They ran to the side, slipping just outside the slow-moving roots. Don't matter. Keep moving. In a hand-to-hand fight without even his sword, he knew he had no chance. They quickly shortened the gap, slipping through the attacking roots with ease. Zell gritted his teeth, stepping back and sending a root snapping upward. It missed. They were too fast. He wasn't, even with his sword. He wasn't the most mobile fighter. They swung their clubs at him from both sides. Their blows served no rhyme or reason, just angry strikes. Zell focused his magic inwards, the vines of his tree rearing and blocking their attacks with hollow thuds. He slipped through the 2 attacking men, trying to rip the roots under their feet. Quircon's magic took a lot more effort than he expected after a long day at work. As a result, it drained the reserves of aether, the magical energy within him, he had left, and the root went limp before they tripped their target. Not good. Bradis reared up a spell of his own with his right hand. With his left, he swung down on Zell's head with his club. Out of pure instinct, and a little fear, Zell dodged the weapon first, only to be blasted back by a burst of lightning. He felt himself tumble back a few feet in the dirt, stopping when his back hit a light post. He tried to stand. Nothing. An electric room, not strong enough to even burn. Zell squinted as he tried to move again. Orange static crackled against his body. A stunning spell. Feeling his legs came a bit too late. Bradis and his other men were on him in seconds, slamming their target with their tombos. Pain flared up everywhere, hit after hit. Zell tried to move, to overpower them. Nothing came. All he could do was take the pain as they struck him. He curled into a ball. It's happening again. After all the talk, it's happening again. Some things never change. You can only fake it for so long. Zell withdrew deep into himself for his magic, feeling the aether deep in his body as they hit him. Old memories surfaced. Memories of a skinnier, sicker Zelnath in a dark alley, blood spewing from the back of his head. This time, it came with an even older memory of a river halfway across the world. That memory brought the aether to the surface. No, he wasn't that man anymore. That boy. That small pup, cowering and crying after they beat him to near death. Born without a backbone. The words echoed again. He felt anger beyond control. Not even the hot-blooded kind that his people was known for. His anger was cold like a frozen lake in winter, or the first flakes of snow on the wind. In that moment, he felt nothing. No pity, no fear, no fatigue, no love, no pain. Only ice on his heart. He pressed his hand on the ground, feeling the dirt underneath. A primal energy soaked through his fingers as he raked his nails against the cobblestone. Wooden thorns jetted from the ground in his cold anger, spiking clean through Bradis' leather chest armor and clean through the other fellow's shoulder, bone and all. They twisted up in the air, screaming in pain. Zell wobbled to his feet to see that brown roots and green vines blanketed a large portion of the ragged way. A surge. Some sort of magical adrenaline. Bradis dangled helplessly by his legs, bleeding from the open wound in his chest. Zell had half a mind to kill them. All of them. This isn't a game, Zell said in a cold voice. Quercon's magic subsided. His staff slithered back to its master. Even with his expended magic, the roots and vines would stay for a good few minutes. The fresh green leaves and the ancient brown roots twisted against their prey, choking all six men now in their embrace. Coughing, gasping, scratching against wood filled the silent street. It's been a long day, Zell said with a little warmth creeping back into his voice. I'll get to the point. I poisoned you. I will kill you and watch you die horribly. I'm tired and hungry. So tell me, is this worth dying for, mate? What's happening out here? The door of the nearby tavern opened. Sounds of the lute, the mandola, and drunk cheers briefly escaped before a few people stepped out and closed the door. The first shadow, lithe and sharp, dispatched the ensnared men with chops to the neck, knocking them unconscious. She snapped her fingers, igniting a small lantern on her side. The small woman in black silks assessed the situation with the ease of a person looking over ledgers. Her brown eyes shifted, from a brief flicker of confusion to perfect clarity in a second. She didn't bother to ask. She walked up to Bradis. Having trouble, are we? You could have knocked, Zell. We're just in the first few songs. Suppose it's our fault for not hearing this commotion. The second shadow leaped from the doorstep. It too lean and sharp. His height was impressive, with quite a few heads on both the woman and Zell. He stepped past each of the unconscious bodies with an exaggerated carefulness. His blue eyes narrowed, looking up the roots and vines. His smile grew wider. Suppose your magic has its uses, but you really need to work on your weapon skills. Maybe then you won't wake the entire neighborhood up. I told you to bring your sword with you always. You don't listen. Char! What? Nilia, the shadowy woman, pinched her nose. Not the time, and I know you're not talking about not listening. Nilia and Char stood waiting for a response. Zell didn't trust his mouth. In this state, it was tricky to know when it ended. No smell of blood? Check. Feeling sore limbs again? Check. Mind clear but a little slower? Check. This was a light berserk in comparison to others he'd experienced. His recently recovering health brought these berserks on, like a healthy orc of his age. He still wasn't great at controlling them yet. Taking a deep breath again, he shook his head clear from the anger and the temptations of slaughter. He was better than a bloodbath. With a simple wave of his hand, the plants retreated into the dirt, leaving the men unconscious, aside from Bradis, on the ground. Who's on duty today? It's me, Yuri, and Romana. Isaac and Emelina already went home for tonight, Char nodded, counting them again. Why? Can you ask him to take these men inside, if you don't mind? I'm really tired, and I haven't had dinner yet. So we're just going to kidnap a whole group of thugs. That's not suspicious at all, Char laughed. We could kill them, Nilia remarked. Then we have to get rid of the bodies, and the city guard doesn't like that kind of thing. Nilia nodded in reluctant agreement. It's tempting, though. It would just be easier. Zell made contact with Bradis when he said it. You don't want that, do you, mate? The green fever had already begun its work. Zell saw the beads of sweat pouring from Bradis's brow and small seizures that threatened every move. Within 2 weeks, the green meant death. During that time, it stole pieces from you, starting with your sight and working its way through your senses. Each day became more and more painful. Aren't you glad that I'm a healer now? You will be by night. Zell slapped the man's face with a genuine good-naturedness like one would do with an old friend. I'll explain in the morning. Bring 'em in and give 'em the best rooms in the house. My treat. I'm too hungry to deal with it now. Lilia smiled and shrugged. When are you not? But all right. This was a standard night for the members of the Black Wind Company. End Chapter 1. Tell me, my lovelies, would you continue reading? Enjoy listening to me read books? Then please hit that like or subscribe button. And if there's a book you'd like me to review, leave me a comment with a buy link. And go to my website, ginny0.wordpress.com. That's Ginny, the number 0.wordpress.com. and get in contact with me there. Speaking of my website, that's where you can find me and all the information about my character-driven werewolf science fantasy and fantasy books. You can also find me on Twitter at Ginny O. My books are available on Amazon and are enrolled in Kindle Unlimited. Next time, I'll be reviewing Tavern and telling you if I liked it and why. See you in the next video, my lovelies.